Marriage is built on trust, or at least that's what I believed. Until the night everything changed. Maria and I were at a family dinner, one of those gatherings where everyone's supposed to feel warm and connected. But from the moment we arrived, something felt strange. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on right away, but there was an unease in my chest I couldn't shake. At first, I thought it was just me overthinking. But as the night went on, I noticed the way she kept glancing across the room. It wasn't until much later that I realized who she was looking at, or rather, who was looking back. And then she disappeared, just like that. No word, no excuse, no sign of where she'd gone. I tried to stay calm, but when I looked around and realized someone else was missing too, my stomach dropped. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to know. So I started searching. What I found that night wasn't just shocking. It shattered everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. Would you have seen it coming? Maria and I met 5 years ago, back when life was simpler. She had this way of making everything around her feel brighter, like she carried the sun in her smile. When we got married 3 years ago, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She wasn't just beautiful, she was everything. We built a good life together. At least, that's what I thought. Our home was filled with laughter, weekend getaways, and late-night conversations about the future. She'd tell me her dreams, I'd tell her mine, and we'd talk about how we'd make them happen. But in marriage, it's not just about the good days. We had our share of fights, some over the little things, like what movie to watch, others over bigger issues, like the way her family treated me. Maria came from a traditional family, one that never quite approved of me. Still, we always found our way back to each other. I thought we were unshakable. I thought what we had was enough. But trust is a fragile thing, isn't it? One moment, it feels like the most solid foundation in the world, and the next, it's crumbling beneath you, leaving you scrambling to understand what went wrong. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, nothing too fancy, just a few relatives, good food, and a chance for Maria and me to unwind after the week's madness. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. It was a chance to get away from the usual grind, to be with people who felt like home. And Maria, well, she was glowing. She always had this energy about her, like she was the center of every room she walked into. That night, her face lit up brighter than usual. The dress she wore, simple but elegant, seemed to accentuate everything about her. I could tell she was excited. I thought it was just because she loved these family gatherings. She's close with her family, always has been. The laughs, the chatter, the familiar faces, it's the kind of environment she thrived in. As we walked into the house, I could already feel the warmth of the people, the buzz of conversation filling the air. It was a typical evening. People greeting each other, sharing stories, the clink of glasses, the smell of food wafting from the kitchen. A perfectly normal family gathering. But things have a way of changing, don't they? Sometimes it's the smallest moment, the briefest glance that can shift everything. And that's when I saw him. Sam. I didn't expect it. I hadn't thought about him in years. Sam was Maria's ex, her first love, the one who left her years ago without a word, without any closure. I knew about him, of course. Maria had never really spoken much about him after they broke up, but I could tell there was still some history there. He was the one she couldn't talk about without a shift in her voice, the one whose name I wasn't supposed to ask about. But there he was, standing in the corner of the room, laughing with some of the family. It was as if he hadn't skipped a beat since the day he left her. It didn't take long for my eyes to lock onto his. And then, like a slow motion moment in a movie, I saw Maria's reaction. She didn't see me staring. She was too busy smiling, greeting everyone in her usual way. But when Sam's eyes met hers, there was something there. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing you tell yourself you're imagining. He looked at her, and she looked back. It wasn't long enough to be considered a look, but it was there. I could feel it in the way her posture shifted, how her smile faltered just for a fraction of a second. It was as if the air between them suddenly thickened, like a thread of something unspoken had pulled them together again. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe I'm overthinking it. She's just being polite. It's a family gathering. People look at each other all the time. But then, it happened again. They exchanged another glance, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just chance. Their eyes met again, this time a little longer, a little more deliberate. I saw something in the way they held each other's gaze, something familiar, something dangerous. I wanted to say something, to brush it off, but I couldn't. I couldn't ignore the feeling creeping up my spine. I wasn't imagining it. They were still connected. I told myself I was being paranoid. It's been years. She's over him. I had to convince myself of that, because the alternative, the idea that my wife, my Maria, still had feelings for him, that was a reality I wasn't ready to face. But I couldn't stop watching them, and then she disappeared. Just like that. One moment she was by my side, laughing and talking, and the next, gone. At first, I thought maybe she'd gone to the bathroom or stepped into another room to catch up with someone. I glanced around the room. I didn't see her anywhere. No big deal, I told myself. Maybe she was just taking a moment to herself. But something didn't feel right. I scanned the room again, and that's when I noticed it. Sam, he was gone too. That's when a knot started to form in my stomach. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The laughter, the music, the chatter, it all felt muffled now. I couldn't concentrate on anything. Something told me to check outside. I didn't even know why. It was like my gut had decided for me. So I slipped through the back door into the cold air of the car lot, the sound of my footsteps cutting through the silence. My eyes swept across the area, searching for any sign of them. And then I saw it, Maria and Sam. They were standing by my car, too close to each other, too intimate. And then, as if time slowed down, they kissed. My heart stopped. My pulse rushed in my ears. Everything around me blurred. It didn't make sense. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I stumbled forward, my voice shaky but loud, the question that had been building up in my chest finally breaking free. "What the hell are you doing, Maria?" She pulled away quickly, her eyes wide with shock, her hand over her mouth like she was trying to hide the truth. I saw the look on her face, the panic in her eyes, and I knew something wasn't right. But she still tried to talk, tried to make it sound like nothing had happened. "It's not what it looks like, Dave. I just needed to talk to him. I needed closure." Closure? That was her explanation? Closure? I couldn't believe my ears. I could feel my body shaking with anger and disbelief. I couldn't even find the words to say what I was thinking, because how could it be possible? Closure? I finally managed to choke out. "You're married to me. What closure could you possibly need?" Her face faltered. For a moment I saw it, the guilt, and in that moment I realized something that scared me more than anything else. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a connection, one that was still alive, and that's when I knew something was wrong. My wife is still in love with her ex. The ride home was silent, suffocating. I couldn't even look at Maria. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, I thought I might break it. The car hummed with tension, each mile feeling like an eternity. The words I wanted to say, needed to say, stuck in my throat. The only thing that kept echoing in my mind was the image of her lips on Sam's. When we finally got home, the door slammed behind us, and it felt like the last door to my peace had just been shut. Maria stood there, eyes wide. "Dave, it was nothing," she said, her voice soft but steady, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "It meant nothing. It was just a kiss. I swear." I couldn't breathe. "Just a kiss?" My voice was raw, sharper than I intended. "Do you honestly think I'm that stupid, Maria? Do you think I didn't see the way you looked at him?" She took a step forward, but I took one back, almost like I was trying to distance myself from the woman I thought I knew. Her expression faltered, but she quickly masked it with a pleading look. "It wasn't like that," she said, almost pleading. "We were talking about old times, about closure, about things we never got to say." I shook my head. "Closure? You've been married to me for 3 years, Maria. What could you possibly need closure for?" Her face tightened. "It's not about you, Dave. It's about..." "I saw the way he kissed you. Don't tell me it's nothing." The words stung as they left my mouth, but they were out there now and I couldn't take them back. Her face softened, but it wasn't the softness of someone who had nothing to hide. No, it was the softness of someone who was trying to find the right words, trying to put the pieces of a broken picture together. She looked at the floor, then back up at me, her eyes confused. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake, okay? A stupid mistake." I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, the anger and hurt mixing with disbelief. I wanted to her how I wanted to believe her. but the doubt had planted its seed, and it was already growing fast and wild. That kiss wasn't just a moment, I said, my voice quieter now, but the weight of it still heavy. It was the beginning of the end. The days that followed were a blur, but one thing was crystal clear. Something had shifted between us. She wasn't the same anymore, and neither was I. Maria started going out more. She'd say she was meeting friends or running errands, but it always felt vague, like she wasn't telling the whole truth. She'd come home late, the faint scent of perfume on her skin, and I would lie awake in bed, pretending to sleep, as the hollow sounds of her keys in the door echoed through the house. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. She was just trying to move on from that night, to forget the tension we both felt. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut every time she came home with that tired, distracted look in her eyes. It wasn't just about the late nights. It was the way she avoided me when she got home, how she always didn't want to talk to me. Our marriage was slowly dying right in front of my eyes. And I was helpless because Maria had suddenly grown too cold, always by herself. The coldness became intense. We argued about very trivial issues. Our fights started to grow, fueled by other things, small things, petty things, but things that had always been simmering beneath the surface. The cultural differences between us, things we'd laughed about in the beginning, things we'd been able to work through, started to feel like walls. We couldn't even talk about our future without it turning into an argument. The way I was raised, the way she was raised, the things we expected from each other. It was like everything that had once brought us together was now driving us apart. I'd always known that our backgrounds weren't the same, but it hadn't mattered before. Maria was so open, so understanding. But now, it felt like we were two different people from two different worlds, and nothing I said seemed to bridge the gap. I couldn't help but wonder if she was using these arguments as a distraction from something bigger, something she was hiding. It was like she needed to push me away, needed to find reasons to make the problems about anything else but the truth. Every night, as I lay in bed next to her, I couldn't help but think, was this how it was going to end? With silence, with fights, with unanswered questions? I didn't know how much longer I could pretend that nothing had changed. Maybe deep down, I already knew what the answer was, but I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. It was the little things that started to eat at me, the things I couldn't ignore anymore. Late at night, when Maria thought I was asleep, I'd catch her sneaking glances at her phone, her face lit up by the screen, her fingers typing furiously. The soft glow of the device would illuminate her face, but the moment she'd notice me stirring, the phone would disappear, tucked away like it was something to hide. I'd asked her about it, casually at first. "Who are you texting so late?" I'd say with a forced smile, but she'd always come up with some excuse. Just checking in with a friend. I tried to believe her. Really, I did, but something in her eyes, something in the way she avoided my gaze, told me I wasn't getting the full truth. The more I saw it, the more I began to question everything. Friends and family began to notice too. At first, they chalked it up to stress, work, life, whatever excuse seemed easiest. But the longer it went on, the more they saw it too. My mom asked me once, her voice laced with concern, "Are you two okay? You don't seem like yourselves anymore." I didn't have an answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that didn't make me sound like a fool. The truth was, I felt like I was slowly losing her, and I couldn't tell if it was because she was pulling away or because I was finally starting to see the cracks I'd been too blind to notice before. It wasn't just about the kiss anymore, I said to myself, my thoughts tumbling over one another like a broken record. It was the distance, the lies, the coldness. It was everything that came after. The more I thought about Maria's behavior, the more I kept coming back to one person, Sam. It couldn't be a coincidence. She'd been seeing him again. I was sure of it. The more I pieced it together, the clearer it became. She'd tell me she was going out with friends, but somehow, every time I asked her about the details, her story seemed to change. Just enough to make me question it. I didn't have solid proof, not yet, but the pieces were all there. She'd start her night in one direction and end up in places I knew didn't add up. When I asked, she'd dismiss it, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the way she'd change the subject or quickly brush off my questions. It felt like she was trying to cover something up, like I wasn't supposed to see it, and maybe I wasn't. One evening, after another of her late-night outings, I sat in the living room, the quiet of the house swallowing me whole. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stand not knowing. So I did it. I asked her outright. "Maria," I said, my voice steady, but the weight of the question hung heavy between us. "Are you still seeing Sam?" She froze. For just a moment, time seemed to stop, and then she laughed, the kind of laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "What? No, of course not. Why would you think that?" But it wasn't the answer I was listening for. It was the tone, the defensive edge in her voice, the way her hands fidgeted like she was trying to come up with a story that would cover her tracks. "I'm just asking, Maria," I said, trying to keep my voice even, but inside I was screaming. "I know something's going on. You don't have to hide it from me." Her expression shifted. It wasn't guilt I saw, but anger, frustration at being caught, maybe. "You don't trust me, do you?" She shot back, her voice tight with defensive energy. "I can't believe you would think that after everything." I could feel my heart sinking. She was deflecting. She was avoiding. And the more she did it, the more I knew I wasn't wrong. The more I knew she was still involved with him. I wanted to believe her, to just let it go. But I couldn't. The doubt had taken root, and no matter how much she tried to brush it aside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been torn apart. And it wasn't just the trust between us. It was something deeper, something that, at this point, felt irreparable. Her defensiveness only made me surer. Something had changed. Something had shifted in her, and I had no idea how to fix it. Or if I even could. A few weeks passed, and we stopped talking about Sam. I told myself that the more I brought up his name, the more issues we would have. I decided I wouldn't confront Maria about it anymore. I was willing to save my marriage. Then I had to travel out of town for work. It was one of those work trips that didn't feel like work. It wasn't just about the meetings or the deadlines. I was looking forward to the escape. I told myself I needed the distance, that it would give me time to think, to clear my head. Maybe, just maybe, if I wasn't right there in the thick of it all, I could stop drowning in my own thoughts. On the surface, I knew I should have been focusing on the project, on the tasks at hand. But my mind kept slipping back to Maria, to Sam, to everything that had been hanging between us like a heavy curtain. I thought about how easy it was to pretend I was fine, how easy it was to convince myself that this was just a phase, that Maria would come back to me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Still, in those few days away, I found a strange sense of relief. The space, physical and mental, gave me a moment of clarity. I could breathe again, even if it was only for a little while. I finished work on time and decided to take the last flight home. I was supposed to return in 3 days, but I finished on time and was able to get back home to Maria. Maybe we could spend some time together like old times and see if we could rekindle something. But nothing prepared me for what I came back to. I came home early thinking I'd surprise Maria, thinking maybe we could have a fresh start, a moment to reconnect. I hadn't told her I was coming back so soon, and I was eager to see her, maybe too eager, because as I stepped through the door, something felt off. The house was quiet, too quiet. Normally there was a buzz, a life to it, especially when I got home. But today there was only the stillness. I walked inside, dropped my bag by the door, and froze. There, by the hallway, I saw some strange male shoes. A cold wave of realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Sam was here. Why was he here? My heart started to race, my throat tightening as I struggled to push past the rising panic. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe he was just dropping by, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew better. I heard voices upstairs, Maria's laughter echoing faintly, and for a split second, I thought about turning around, walking out, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't. Something inside me, the part of me that was tired of running from the truth, pushed me forward. I had to see for myself. I had to face it, even if I wasn't ready. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last, as if the weight of what I was about to find was pressing down on me. When I reached the top, I hesitated for a moment, my hand lingering on the doorknob of our bedroom. For the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I opened the door, and there they were, Maria, my wife, and Sam, her ex, tangled in the sheets, their bodies pressed together as if nothing in the world had ever come between them. Time stopped. The silence in the room was deafening. I don't know how long we stood there, frozen, Maria, Sam, and I. But in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. It was just us, suspended in this brutal, suffocating reality. My mind raced, my thoughts crashing against one another in a tidal wave. I thought I'd feel rage, fury, something, anything. But there was only emptiness. A hollow, aching emptiness that spread through me like ice. Dave's voiceover cuts through the stillness. I thought I'd feel anger, but all I felt was emptiness. Like the life I'd been holding on to had just slipped away and there was nothing left to grasp. I wanted to scream, to ask why, but the words stuck in my throat. The anger wasn't there, not yet. All I could do was stand there, watching as my world crumbled into pieces around me. I'd never felt more invisible in my life, like I didn't even exist to them. Maria's eyes met mine, and in that split second, I saw the fear in her gaze, the guilt, the realization that no matter how hard she tried to justify it, this moment the truth was undeniable. But there was no way to take it back, no way to undo the destruction that was already set in motion. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Sam didn't even bother to say a word. He just got up, grabbed his jacket, and walked past me like I wasn't even there. His eyes never met mine, not once. I didn't want him to look at me anyway. There was nothing he could say to make this moment right, no explanation that could justify what I had just seen. Maria didn't move. She stayed there, in the bed, her hands trembling by her sides as she watched Sam leave. There was nothing left to say to him, but there was plenty to say to her. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart racing, my mind reeling. I wanted to scream, to ask every question that had been burning in me for weeks, but the only thing that came out was a quiet, almost broken, "Why, Maria? Why wasn't I enough?" She didn't answer right away. She couldn't. The words were stuck in her throat, like she was fighting with herself to even admit the truth. Her gaze fell to the floor, her face crumbling as she began to cry. And in that moment, something in me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending that this wasn't real. The lies, the hurt, the months of trying to hold on to something that was already gone. It was all too much. I watched her break down, her sobs echoing through the empty room. But no matter how hard she cried, no matter how many apologies she whispered between the tears, it didn't change what had just happened. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional, deep, and irreversible. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to reach out, tell her everything would be okay, but I couldn't. I couldn't pretend anymore. She had shattered the trust that I had built, the trust that had been the foundation of our relationship. And that kind of damage wasn't something you could fix with a few tears and empty words. I turned away, and for the first time, I realized that walking out of that room wasn't just about leaving her behind. It was about leaving myself behind. I packed my things quickly, not looking back. There was no need for any more goodbyes, no need for any more false hope. I was done. As I walked out of that house, I felt the weight of everything we had, everything I thought we had, crumbling into dust. I could hear her calling my name from behind me, her voice cracking in desperation. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Love in the end wasn't enough. Not when trust was gone, not when respect had been lost, not when loyalty was a distant memory. Without those things, love was just a word. And for me, it had lost all meaning. I walked out the door into the night with nothing left but the echo of what once was. And I realized as I stepped away that sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving. It's knowing that everything you thought was solid, everything you believed in, was never really there at all. As I walked down the driveway, the weight of everything hit me all at once. I gave her my heart. I gave her everything, my trust, my loyalty, my love. And she took it, handed it over to someone else like it didn't mean a thing. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was the slow, quiet erasure of everything we built together. But I'm done with that. I'm done being the fool. I've spent too much of myself trying to hold on to something that wasn't real anymore. Now, for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm taking my heart back. I'm not going to give it away again. Not to anyone. Not to her. The night air was cool against my skin as I walked away from the house, our house, the place that had once felt like home. But now it was just a place. a place full of memories that no longer had a hold on me. I don't know where I'm going from here, or what's next, but I do know this. I'm walking away from the lies, from the pain, from the past. I'm walking towards something else, something that I've forgotten about for too long.